And welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP, Urbana, 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Yes, it is. Views expressed are those of the speakers. They are, and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself, and anyone whose opinion may find its way through an article that I happen to read to you. Because there are opinions, embodied in the work of these authors, and it comes across. So you will hear opinions. I don't choose articles because I necessarily agree with every word of them. I choose them because they express something about a point that I want to talk about. So, having said that, now you know who to blame. If you don't like what you hear, blame me. You can blame whoever's article I'm reading. You can blame the times that we live in. You can blame anybody you want except WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or UPTV. Got it? Okay, good. Glad to hear it. Just want to get that stuff clear, get it all out in the open so that you understand what's going on. So I am guestless tonight. If you're watching UPTV, you know that. Hi. If you're listening to the radio show, you now know it. You didn't know it before, perhaps, but you know it now. And there's, I don't know if it's hard to say. I was going to say there's a lot going on. I don't know that there's a lot going on there, but there's some pretty big things that are happening or that have happened that are worth discussing maybe in more depth. And so we're going to just talk about immigration, and politics will enter in there. You will hear opinions that are not what you might call complementary to the current administration and perhaps even Congress and the Senate. Can't be helped. I know that at one point, early on in the forum, we had some discussions like, well, we need to be nonpartisan. We can't, come down on any one side on these things, because then we won't be able to work with the other side. If we allow ourselves to be sucked into the partisan left-right divide, then whichever side we're cozying up to or supporting, the other side will say, well, you're just one of them, and they won't listen to us anymore. And in an effort to do our work or to make things happen, we need to be able to be more flexible than that. And that's, in an ideal world, I agree with that. In a perfect world, in a place where politicians work as advertised, as they're supposed to, trying to make things better for people, for everybody, for their constituents, for their country, their state, their city. If politicians really were doing that, and that was their priority, then you would want to work with everybody, because you would want to work towards consensus, help them arrive at a consensus that would be what was best for everyone. And so in stating your view, you would be saying, okay, I'm trying to move the argument a little bit this way, because that's where I think it should be going. This is what would be most helpful to the people that I care about. But sadly, it doesn't really work like that much anymore. There are still a lot. That is not to say that there aren't still a lot of politicians who go out there and try to do their best for their country, their state, their city, their constituents, for people, for all people. They're just trying to make it a better world for all people. And there are those politicians in every party. There are some that do that. There are also politicians who see their job as being to maneuver things so that their side gets as much of everything as they can, and that the other side gets as little as possible. It's all a game of power and control. And sadly, there are more of them than there are of the others. Or maybe it would be more fair to say that the majority of politicians sort of falls in the middle between those two extremes. And they try to help their country, their state, their people, whatever, as much as they can, while still lending their weight towards making sure their side comes out on top and gets as much of everything as it can, while the other side loses to that same degree in the other direction. And that's the problem. There aren't enough people who just have good conscience and who will say, okay, you know what? I'm going to work for what's best. And I don't care who comes up with the idea. I care that it's a good idea. And, there'll be a lot that will say that that's what they're doing, I'm sure. And it just so happens that their side has all the good ideas. And that is the problem that the partisanship has created. It's defined where we stand in such a way as to exclude opinions other than your own, I guess. I don't know how to put it. It's just, I suppose the best way to talk about this would be to talk about it in terms of immigration. So you have now people who are like, well, immigrants are great. They're wonderful. We should support them. We should be bringing more people into this country. We need to make everybody welcome, embrace them all. And then you have people who are like, immigrants are destroying our way of life. They're taking our jobs. They're hurting everybody, blah, 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 blah. And it's almost not possible to try to include some of the ideas from the other side because they're starting from such a fundamentally different point of view. Immigrants are bad. Immigrants are good. Well, those two things don't agree. So anything that I do in support of working with the idea that immigrants are good is going to be the wrong thing to do if your perspective is that immigrants are bad. So where the problem lies, I think, is farther back down the idea chain, if you want to call it that, with what animates your ideas in the first place. And that's where decades of creating sides and the evolution of the creation of sides, of camps, of tribes, however you want to describe it, has worked to maneuver everything so that it's all interlocking. Immigrants are bad for any number of reasons. It's not just, I can't engage someone from that perspective and just say, well, why are immigrants bad? I mean, what's wrong with them? This person's an immigrant, that person is an immigrant. Are they bad? And the answer you'll get is, well, no, they're not bad. They're fine. But immigrants, writ large, as a big thing, are bad. And so it's like the ideas start way down, and they're formed and carefully crafted to lock together to a point where it's difficult to take any one of them out without breaking that chain. And that's what's really hurting us, I think, is this the complexity of the divisions as created by people who are trying to create divisions, who are trying to say, okay, well, this is their point of view. How can I counter that? Because we don't want them to win. So we want our ideas to win. How do our ideas counter theirs? Excuse me. I'm very sorry. I had to sneeze. I at least turned the volume down so that you didn't have to hear me sneeze. But that was what that long pause was about. I felt a sneeze approaching, and I didn't want to sneeze in your ear, so I turned the volume off. And hopefully that didn't upset you too much to go, where'd the sound go? Anyway, I'm not getting sick. It's just allergies. It's that time of year that things start to decay. I was out pulling some weeds and doing some things, like that today, and breathing in the dust. Boy, I'm stuttering. Dust. Breathing in the dust of decay. And now my nose is snuffly and I'm sneezing. But anyway, sorry, that was a diversion? Not really a diversion. That's not right. It was a detour off of the point. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into this, but my point is just that there are a lot of people that have spent a lot of time crafting positions that are diametrically opposed, because it's not good enough to be just slightly different, to be kind of angled off, maybe 10 degrees this way when the other side is angled off 10 degrees the other way. That's not different enough. That doesn't create that division. That doesn't give people a sense of well, oh no, we can't let them win because they're just slightly different from us. No, their goal has to be the opposite of ours. So everything is created in this weird way now where everything is opposite, and you can't compromise very much, because compromise now is saying, all right, we'll do 4 of my things and 4 of your things, and 3 out of those 4 will probably be destroying each other or balancing out in such a way as that nothing gets done. So maybe 1 or 2 things will get done, whereas we could have gotten 4 things done, but we can't because we totally disagree. With immigration, it's well, we'll let you have a few immigrants, but in return, you have to let us have money for, border enforcement and, all these different things. I mean, they're just completely opposite. Border enforcement and more money for more border enforcement doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anybody's life. Building a wall doesn't help anybody's life. All those things do is put money in the pockets of certain contractors, government contractors, and it creates a sense that there's something dangerous that you're trying to defend against. So if you're trying to support immigrants, you can't support militarization of the border because it's hurting a few people that are trying to come through. It's maybe killing them or injuring them in some way, or arresting them and putting them through all sorts of things. B, it's creating this sense of fear, oh look, we have an army on the border defending us against these hordes of aliens that are trying to come in. C, it's wasting money that could be used to help somebody and build something and create something positive. I could go on. I mean, I could list any number of reasons why that is just a really bad idea to do that. So how can I, in the interest of compromise, support something like that? Well, it's really hard. I can't. And so I'll say, well, just a little bit more money for border enforcement, but the rest of it has to go for, helping people find jobs and helping people relocate. And they're going to go, oh, no, but then you're supporting this horde of dangerous immigrants that are coming here. You're encouraging them by doing this. So you see what I mean? It just creates this sense of no matter what I'm trying to do, you're trying to do the opposite. And that's what partisanship has created. and sadly, there are people trying to make it even more diametric, even more opposed, even more different, to tease out those fine points and craft them so they're even more carefully composed to be the opposite, because that's creates sides, and then people have to take a side, and if we can get enough people on our side, then we'll win. And this whole sense of winning, it's not the people winning, it's not the country winning, it's your side winning. And that's where we're at right now. That's the situation we're in, the nation that we have become. So as I read these articles and talk about these things, there's an underlying current there of this point that there are almost no compromises possible because of this strange crafting of opposites that has gone on. Not strange, the cynical. That's how I should put it. A cynical crafting of oppositional thinking that has gone on for years and years and years with people who are simply, their primary purpose is to gain power. It is to gain control. It is to gain leverage. It is to score points. It's to destroy the enemy. All those things are primary in the minds of the operatives that do these things. So, I don't know. That's what makes it difficult to talk about this stuff in a way that is bipartisan, because I can't. I just can't. I am stuck being on one side of this issue. I have looked at the situation. I've looked at the people involved. I've looked at the economy and the workers, the jobs that are created, the way of life that exists, and I've seen what I believe to be a positive influence on all those things, and that is immigrants. It's people here too. People here create good things. Immigrants also bring good things, and they bring new good things that we didn't have before. They promote growth in our society. So we're not just, okay, we like it this way, we're just going to freeze it and stay that way forever. That's not growth. That's not living and becoming something that's just stagnating and staying the same, and until it just gets more and more and more boring and ossified. There's a word for you. And it becomes brittle, and then it crumbles to dust, and something new comes and sweeps it away. That's what happens when you try to resist change. Change is growth. Growth is change. Those things happen to strengthen, to make life perpetuate. Keeping things the same is not living, it's existing. Anyway, that's my point. That's where I'm at, and that's why I fall on the side of, I'm going to go ahead and be partisan. And if you're listening to this show and you're expecting me to say, an equal share of nice things about the current administration or the Republican Party generally, you're going to be very disappointed, because I can't do it. I can't do it and be true to the things that I believe in. And I'm sorry that I can't do it. I would like to be able to do it. I know there are people who lean towards being Republicans, or who, have that kind of general idea of how they think things should work, who are good people. But in my opinion, they're attaching themselves to something that's dragging them further and further in the wrong direction, and further away from being good people towards not being good people. And that's my opinion. I'm free to express it, because this is an open forum for this community, and I'm a member of this community, so I'm expressing my opinion. That is a view that is not necessarily shared by WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or UPTV. That is my view. So, having said that, I will go on to read a few things here. The first article I have here is from Fortune magazine. Sounds like a pretty Republican-y sort of thing, doesn't it? Well, the article reads as follows. The title of the article is Why Your Economic Argument Against Immigration is Probably Wrong. Fortune magazine, a business-friendly publication. Let's see what they have to say. So the author says, by threatening to repeal the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, President Trump has again elevated immigration to the national forefront. The debate has quickly reverted to familiar territory: crime, taxes, the safety net, national identity, and, of course, wages and jobs for native-born workers. In announcing the likely end of DACA, Attorney General Jeff Sessions claimed that the program was pushing Americans out of work and eating away at their paychecks. Sessions' comments, coupled with cable news' nearly nonstop commentary, gives the impression of a raging discourse among economists over the economic impact of immigration. The thing is, the debate just isn't there. While economists rarely agree on much, immigration has found a rare near consensus among the profession. The University of Chicago periodically surveys a balanced panel of well-regarded economists on topical issues. In a poll on highly skilled immigration, a whopping 95% of economists who answered thought that the average American would be better off with more immigrants. The other 5% were uncertain. The sentiment on low-skilled immigration was less overwhelming, but it was close. Economists have found common ground on the topic because study after study reinforces the notion that immigration makes native-born Americans better off on a wide range of effects: innovation, the price of goods and services, the number of jobs, government finances, and even wages. Across the board, the overwhelming bulk of evidence points to improved livelihoods for Americans. On innovation, the evidence is clear that immigration has a positive impact, from higher rates of patents to more entrepreneurship. For example, economists Jennifer Hunt and Marjolaine Gauthier-Loziel, there's a long name, found that a small increase in skilled immigration can boost patents on the order of 10 to 20%. On costs, immigration lowers prices economy-wide, ranging from cheaper groceries to less expensive childcare. For instance, economist Patricia Cortez found that increasing low-skilled immigration by 10% would drop the price of services like gardening and housekeeping by about 2%. On jobs, immigration boosts employment because immigrants are not only workers but consumers too. Some of the best evidence on this was raised by economists John McLaren and Gi-Hoon Hong, who found that every immigrant to the U.S. creates 1.2 new jobs, almost all going to U.S. citizens. Here, McLaren and Hong aren't measuring whether immigrants are taking jobs away from existing native-born workers, but are rather measuring the number of new jobs created by each new immigrant consumer. In the parlance of economics, this study points to the increase in demand for jobs rather than the supply. The study does not distinguish between the impact of skilled and unskilled immigration on jobs created. On government finances, the net impact of immigration is positive overall, although it has varying impacts depending on whether immigrants are authorized or unauthorized, and, in particular, whether one is referring to the federal budget or state and local finances. Analysis on this point tends not to distinguish between skilled and unskilled immigration. The federal government unambiguously wins with more immigration. Immigrants tend to be younger and pay more into the tax system than they take out in benefits. Unauthorized immigrants often don't receive social benefits despite paying into the system. To take one example, Social Security's chief actuary found that in recent years, unauthorized immigrants contributed about 13 times more revenue into the program than they took out. Similarly, the Congressional Budget Office found that easing the journey to legal immigration would reduce the deficit by tens of billions of dollars. The picture is less clear at the state and local level. Unauthorized immigration probably provides a slight net boost. For unauthorized immigration, states don't benefit the same as the federal government and instead likely see, on average, modestly higher cost driven by increased education spending. But it's debatable as to whether and when this education investment gets paid back. A National Academy of Sciences review found that children of immigrants contribute, on average, more per capita in tax revenue than either their immigrant parents or native-born Americans. The key point is that, taken on the whole, immigrants put more into government coffers than they take out. If you're looking for a debate among economists about immigration, the closest you'll find is on the topic of wages. The bulk of studies have found that low-skilled immigrants fulfill jobs that Americans don't want, low-paying, physically taxing agricultural jobs, and that more immigration at all skill levels help American-born workers raise their pay by becoming more productive. On the flip side, a handful of studies have found that immigration can drive down wages in local labor markets. Perhaps the most famous of these perspectives comes from economist George Borjas, who in a series of studies found that wages of low-skilled U.S. workers take a substantial hit when low-skilled immigration rises. In sum, economists pretty much agree that immigration boosts innovation and encourages entrepreneurship, lowers consumer prices, raises employment, and strengthens government finances overall. And while the evidence is mixed, immigration probably boosts wages too, although there may be some situations in which Americans' paychecks fall a bit. Given the evidence, it's no wonder economists tend to agree that immigration makes us all better off. Focusing on DACA, the evidence is even more in favor of the program than immigration on the whole because of the relatively high skill level of beneficiaries. Individuals eligible for the DACA program tend to be higher skilled than their ineligible counterparts, simply because the typical DACA-eligible immigrant arrived in the Americas at age 6 and was educated in the U.S. Put differently, sending DACA participants back to their home countries would be a waste of billions in human capital already invested in the young immigrants. If you're someone who opposes immigration in general, or DACA in particular, you probably have your reasons. Maybe you don't like the demographic change that comes from immigration. Maybe you believe that immigration, especially the unauthorized variety, is a threat to national security. Maybe you're convinced that DACA is unconstitutional, but don't cite the economy. So I read that. I really don't like making the economic argument, generally speaking. But I thought this was an interesting thing to find in Fortune magazine, of all places. Again, a very right-leaning, pro-business magazine. I guess I'm sure it's probably still a magazine somewhere in the world. It's mostly an online thing these days, but there may be a paper version out there somewhere. But it's important to see some pushback even in that kind of place for the arguments that you hear. I mean, we had our Attorney General get on TV and basically lie about DACA recipients in his statements on why they were ending the program. That's pretty bad. That seems to be okay for some people.